It's an Archaeo-death interview with Ellie Chambers on her recent publication on Archaeo-media.
Archaeo-deathlings, it's Professor of Archaeology Howard Williams here, but with my extra special, just published in a peer-reviewed journal, guest, Ellie. Ellie, introduce yourself and let's get down to chatting about this new publication.
Oh, I don't think I can meet your energy, Howard, but yeah, I'm Ellie.
Sorry, I'll calm it down. Yeah, it's Ellie here, and we're going to talk about stuff, okay? You know, is that better?
That's much better. At least I can match that, if not exceed it. Yeah, I am one of Howard's PhD students, so I have appeared on Archaeo-death before a few years ago.
You have, twice, I believe.
Yeah, maybe. Definitely looking younger and much less tired right at the start of my PhD journey.
You're getting younger all the time.
Yeah, but now very happy that, I've managed to take something out of my PhD and publish it in World Archaeology. So it's coming out at the moment. I don't think it's a Science 20 issue, but it will be in the Debates in World Archaeology issue, and specifically looking at the kind of wider topic of my thesis, which is about how archaeologists and archaeology interact with the media, the online news media, what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong, you know, where there might be some myths coming out and some sort of grumblings that maybe aren't actually true when we look into it deeper, and trying to think about how we can be better public communicators through the media, because we always talk about public archaeology. It's a huge thing. It's such an important element of archaeology. And to me, at least, and I think it's fair to say, the online news has been left out of the conversation for far too long as one of the biggest ways that we can reach a wide audience.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because there's been like 20 plus years, and as you open your article, Clackham Britain's Archaeology in the Media book 2007, there's never not been conversations about how we're represented, misrepresented in the media. And yet it's really a timely moment, both for your thesis and for the broader discussion, to bring up some up-to-date examples. And I should have said this is in the journal World Archaeology, and the article is called Archaeo-media, breaking the binary and building agency in archaeological news reporting. And it's the way these, for those who don't know, the way these academic journals work is it will join a volume, but it's currently a first view article with a DOI, but not paginated in the final form. So the first page is 1, but it may be 58. There's this game that we play in archaeological or academic publishing now, and these leading publishers. So it is published, but it is yet to be paginated into a final volume. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's as much as I know. I have no idea when the actual volume is coming out. I didn't even know when this was going to come out. It just sort of appeared one day. So yeah, that's
and it's a weird dynamic that no one will properly explain to you. That I've had this happen to a number of publications where you publish, you know, Williams 2012 or something, and then you find it becomes Williams 2013 because it then, and I think, hang on, but it was out. It's such a mess, these publishing situations. But the main thing is, I want to start off by asking you about this article, and the idea is to sort of just showcase it and celebrate it and go, woohoo, article out, bragathon, archaeo brag, but also to say, you know, to ask about some of the ideas. So one of the things I wanted to sort of just drill into is this neologism archaeo-media that because we have so many archaeos and so many subdisciplines: public archaeology, media archaeology, landscape archaeology, you know, burial archaeology. You know, I really like this term and how you've used it. Could you give us a little introduction to why you think we need it?
Yeah, so the kind of context for Archaeo-media is that I am suggesting it now as a term that we should be using to consider how archaeology is presented in the media. In my case, I'm specifically talking about online news media, but it does apply to like various different forms of media. It kind of started actually by me just not knowing what to call something. So as part of my thesis, I've got this kind of exploration of how archaeology, and specifically bioarchaeology, has been presented in the online news over a 4-year period. And I was trying to categorize the different kind of areas of responsibility, I guess. So who would be creating certain things? So what was down to what the journalists were creating, what was down to how the archaeology worked, and how that then became part of the news, and then where was the intersection between the two. And so I proposed the word Archaeo-media, and I kind of brought it to you and to my other supervisor, Amy, and said, I've come up with this word, I don't really know if it fits. And then you got very excited and you were like, Archaeo is the best, Archaeo-death, Archaeo-death.
Archaeo soup, let's not forget the Archaeo soup. No, God, yeah.
Archaeo everything.
Yeah.
So, and so I started to actually think about it as a word and what it could mean and what meaning I should be applying to it, because that point it was just sort of a placeholder word for something that I was trying to describe and couldn't. And in the end, it's become kind of my definition of it anyway, would be a word to describe the process of archaeological content going into the media or being in the media. So how we might write a press release, how we consider public archaeology, and then how that manifests in the media. So a kind of theoretical and process-driven, like, I don't know, thing.
It's not just archaeology in the media, it's the process by which these stories or, you know, academic research ideas translate and get disseminated. And some of these stories just go to one or two articles, but some of these go absolutely viral, don't they? You know, and hundreds of stories pick them up all over the world with increasing levels of of sensationalism and ludicrous misunderstandings can sort of, you know, flip through, I guess. I suppose that's why I think it is a good term, because it's about that whole process. Yeah.
I mean, it is important to think of it as a process and to think of it as like a theoretical approach, but then also it's the product. So a news article is a piece of Archaeo-media, and I think that having something to define that, that's kind of where I came into that title, where I was talking about building agency and breaking the binary, because I think there's this concept of archaeology and the media. And then once something becomes a piece of media, so a news article or a TV documentary or whatever, archaeologists sit back and can go, well, that's not me anymore. I didn't create that. That has been created by this external profession. And I think that that's untrue and almost ignorant, I guess, like not trying to place any blame anywhere, because I think that it's an assumption that's been made for a really long time. But we have to take ownership and appreciate the agency that we do have in these spaces. And so to say, oh, Stonehenge is always in the news, yeah, it is, because that's what the media are using to contextualize other stories. If we don't want Stonehenge in the news, maybe make a press release a little bit better, give the people a bit more context, try and find other ways to include information that doesn't mean that a journalist has to rely on Stonehenge to try and provide information about the Neolithic or the Bronze Age, or however they're choosing to use Stonehenge in that way, or try and be a better communicator. So like, it's not just the people who study Stonehenge, who maybe are very good with the press now because they've been dealing with them for so long, are getting into the newspapers in the first place. So it's about taking back some ownership over some archaeological processes and some public engagement.
So, I mean, you talk about political agendas that become infused by the stories that are not in the original press release or research, but become co-opted by the news media, where this is one area where the standard view is they take it and ruin it or manipulate it. But often it's more complicated than that. Maybe, I don't know. But give us some examples of the things you cover about the political agendas at play.
Yeah, so I think that obviously the news is incredibly politicized, and we are, in the UK especially, we have a news agency and a news kind of corporate machine that can dictate elections, as it can do in the US and in Australia and anywhere that kind of Murdoch is involved mostly. But the power of Murdoch press has reduced over time, but the power of the press in general, things like the Daily Mail, the Guardian, they are controlling the narrative about how elections run, and that can have a massive influence. So this is a politicized space, and obviously people acknowledge that archaeology is a political discipline. So when you have these two incredibly political areas coming together and trying to create a product, there will be manipulation. But I think that it's inherently flawed to only see that manipulation coming from the media. So you might have a study that you think is completely desanitized, there's no way to make it political, and then it ends up in the news, and oh no, everyone's interpreted it as this like big Brexit thing or something to do with white supremacy. Oh, what a shame, isn't that all the media's fault? It doesn't work that way. I think people need to, especially archaeologists, need to be reviewing their research and thinking about the ways that the public might be receiving it and what the political climate and what the kind of cultural climate is at the point of publication. So you might have a story. The example that I use in my article and also one of the case studies in my thesis is Cheddar Man. So, it's to give some context, we're talking about one of the oldest near complete skeletons in the UK. Ancient DNA analysis revealed that he would have likely had dark skin. So within a modern context, that is viewed as being black. So then, as you say, this is one of the bigger news stories. This was picked up by loads of outlets over the course of a few weeks, but then it kind of had a long tail. It's lasted over a few years. So this came out in 2018. We're still seeing the kind of after effects of it now. And the point that the study was published, there's absolutely no reason to make this connection other than thinking about what is going on in the world. It was published at the same time as the royal wedding between Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. And so...
I remember them.
Yeah. And so, to be honest, not people I think about very often. I'm not a monarchist. I think a lot of archaeologists aren't monarchists and probably pride themselves on being so because of the political kind of alliances of the discipline. So it might not have come into their minds. But for my thesis, I've had to read a lot of Sun, like a lot of the Sun's articles about archaeology. And so whilst reading those articles on the sidebar, Meghan Markle, Meghan Markle, Meghan Markle, Meghan Markle. And so the association gets forged in your mind. And I think that a part of the reason why Cheddar Man was so powerful and was picked up by so many outlets wasn't just because it's someone in the past with dark skin, because that can happen fairly regularly. It's because it was happening at the same time that we had this, racialized woman coming into this very British heritage, kind of, big British identifier of the royal family. And so to then take someone that could be a symbol of British heritage, of someone that, because of the time depth since that he was alive, has, can be linked to a lot of origin myths, and to then say that they also had dark skin, the two connections were definitely made. And then you have direct comparisons being made on social media by people, even in America. There was a US senator that I think got sacked or, had quite serious repercussions for photoshopping pictures of the two of them together. There's an independent article that talks about Meghan Markle with regards to Cheddar Man. And so you have these really disparate things, but it's something that researchers need to be conscious of, that this is where the conversation is at the moment. Even if, a 2018 American actress, princess woman has nothing to do with your Mesolithic study, if you want to put that Mesolithic study out into the world, then you have to think about how those two things might be connected and what damage can be done to those other stories and how they can catalyze each other.
Absolutely. So we can't control the narrative, but we can guess that anything to do with skin color, anything to do with sexuality, sex, gender could go ballistic. Anything to do with sensitive topics about children and the lives and unpredictable and unexpected deaths or particular diseases, there's so many things that potentially we need to be ahead of the game and proactive and thinking through. I guess I think that's really healthy. And yeah, people are going to use things for political ends, but then it's hypocritical within the broader profession, not individuals, that some things people sort of claim not to know about and other things clearly people are actively avoiding talking about. There's that sort of self-censorship on topics that and this is sort of no sort of consistency in my sense of things, that some people are going to go, oh yeah, I'm going to stand proud and talk about this issue that's really relevant and political, even though it's going to get me lots of flack. And then the next minute they're, oh no, we won't talk about that. We've got to be respectful. We've got to be sensitive to this. And I think, hang on, where's the consistency here? I'm not saying it's easy to, on an individual level, to work out, but we all sort of seem to be swimming in very weird waters where we're not exactly sure which direction we're supposed to go in with our research. But something surely they could have anticipated would go viral,
Yeah, and I think so my suggestion is that we shouldn't just be disengaging from this research because there's a chance that people might disagree with it. I think that would be, that would be half the profession would have to stop working, because at the moment so much of what we do is politicized and comes from political places. People are choosing to do the research they're doing because they think it's going to help someone in the world, some social justice issue. But I'm suggesting that we just bring in risk assessments, media risk assessments from the start of a project. In the same way, when I worked in a museum running like school sessions, I didn't really expect any children to cut their hands with safety scissors or close their eyes with glue and stick them together. But I put it on a risk assessment and I thought about how I could mitigate against it, what the consequences would be. And I think we just need to be doing the same thing for our research. We need to think about the social, cultural, political risks of our research, not just hoping blindly that whatever we suggest is going to be right. That if we can say, oh, look, there's someone with dark skin in the past, suddenly we're this like anti-racist force for good, because it's not coming across that way. We need to think about what the consequences of these actions might be.
And because any big story like that will be simultaneously sensationalized and manipulated by multiple different directions, particularly on very polemicized topics. So if it's about the identity of, say, a particular part of the world that's heavily politicized, any new research coming out of there is potentially simultaneously being used in literally contradictory methods. So it's not about just the right wing or the left. It can be all manner of much more complex kaleidoscope of uses that you suddenly finding the research is feeding into, and it's difficult to know what to correct. I have a few dilemmas of that about of my own like this, where, for example, I know when people say the Vikings were not a race or ethnicity or culture, they were an occupation, I go, well, that's misleading as well, and that is used by people in extremist politicized ways too, even though it serves a soundbite version of dismissing one set of myths about sort of race and ethnicity. It also sets up a whole other ideas about pirates and adventurers and hypermasculine warriors, doing all manner of things they shouldn't. And so these often play off each other. So it's not like there's one right answer of the narrative and the news are going to go with something wrong, because it's a dilemma. Siluran Carbidus, or whatever the names of the monsters, isn't it? So whichever way you go, it'll be gobbled up by one set of ideas. I don't know. I don't know your thoughts on how we do it, but I think risk assessment's certainly a constructive way, isn't it? And you talk about in the article about how when we engage, when is all engagement a good thing? And sometimes maybe it's best not. I think that's really important.
Yeah, I think we have to be really conscious about what we're doing, and maybe at the moment we're not, because, as I say, there's this drive towards these really good intentions, and so there's this kind of constant, maybe not constant, because we're talking about archaeology in the news, so it's a much smaller thing than, say, politics in the news or health in the news, but within archaeology at least, it feels to me that there's this churn of scientific studies particularly that is looking at features like sex, gender, race, ethnicity, sexuality in some cases, even though that's a lot harder. And it's trying to do good in the world. We're saying, okay, we identify that there are problematic views about this, and what can archaeology do to make this better? But then we're releasing it without any sort of evaluation as to whether it was successful, what went wrong, what went right. And then it is going wrong. People are, being reinforced in their negative views by the archaeological studies that we're releasing. And then we just do it again and again and again, and we're not taking the time to stop and look and think, okay, how should we be approaching this? And so I think that one of the solutions to that, other than, as I say, risk assessing, I think there are some other things we need to be doing, like much more media training and consideration of how we are engaging with the news, the things that we say, whether we are sensationalizing ourselves, but also just like we don't need to always be in the press. Maybe we don't need to be producing as much research as we are. Maybe, I don't mind a slow science approach, that as part of that slow science, we think about the media strategy, and not engaging is okay sometimes.
Well, it seems very hypocritical of me because I'm always doing TikToks, but my view is that I like a bit of hype when I can control it, and I feel very out of my depth when I know that a big story has gone out, and I'm not interested. I'm not trying to, oh, I'm really excited, I'm in the media. No, it feels really uncomfortable because you don't know where it's going to go. And so I like media where I can shut it down if I need to. If everyone hates a particular video or a particular post, I can literally delete it. And of course, there's people who will get out, he deleted it, he must have been wrong. But a lot of the time, it's about just trying to, well, I don't have the time for that argument or that discussion. But with stuff that's in the media, it's really being seen by such a volume of people. You can't hide, can you? And that really scares me. The how I actually might produce something that people actually want to read. No, thank you. I'll go back into my books, please. It is terrifying. And you cite some cases where people have been targeted and have had to sort of go offline and hide away for a period. Well, nothing they did wrong, but because of the volume of interest. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it is dangerous. Like I think that there needs to be much more institutional support. And once it's not, I'm talking about archaeology because that's our field, but realistically, this is something that will be affecting all SciComm and HumsComm, if that's a thing. I don't know.
I'm
I hear
sure it is.
um, but communication of academia in general.
Wait a minute. Archaeocomms.
Of course.
I know you were talking more broadly, but we should archaeo this as well. So
Archaeo everything. So it's like Wurzel Gummidge when you know, instead of Wurzelese, Archaeoes.
yeah, exactly. You put archaeo in front of every second word, and archaeo becomes a archaeo idea that archaeo. Oh no, I can't do it. Every noun.
What's my train of thought? Oh, okay. So it is. Yeah, it's a dangerous thing to do. And I mean, the example that I cite is Colleen Morgan, who wasn't engaging with the media, wasn't trying to promote anything, just, you know, put up content information on one of their modules that they were teaching, and it was FOI'd or it was found in some way by the right-wing press, and then published, became a woke archaeology. Students don't like even want to see skeletons because they're such snowflakes, you know, all this rubbish. And so institutional support is going to be really important. And something else that I've realized as well is we're talking about archaeologists, and it is important to think about archaeologists here, but when journalists put things out, they don't know what's going to happen either. So something that I've discussed as part of my thesis, it didn't make it into the paper, looking at Cheddaman, there is quite a well-cited New Scientist article that kind of questions the results of the study, whether it was accurate, and sort of discusses about skin pigmentation and whether we can estimate that through ancient DNA. And it uses, you know, expert quotes, and it is just trying to add some kind of like critical theory to the study. Now, I've been in conversation with the New Scientist, and I know that article came out because they were just trying to say, well, it seemed like the study was being presented as fact, and the person who I spoke to was saying, you know, there is no scientific fact. We need to think about the progression of knowledge and, you know, really consider this context. But now, as soon as Cheddaman is mentioned, even beyond Cheddaman, as soon as any sort of global majority people in the UK are mentioned, that article gets sent straight out on Twitter or X or whatever. And is didn't you see, this has been debunked. They admitted that they lied. And this is absolutely not what the journalist was intending in any way, or what the outlet was intending. And so we need to, you know, the people that we're working with aren't necessarily the enemies. That can happen to everyone. And the way that a kind of wide public, because it's so wide reaching, the media interacts with a study is completely like unknown until it's out there. We don't know what the end uses are going to be, and that is definitely scary and something that we need to be much better prepared for.
So you end the study by saying that we need strategies and we need ethical frameworks, and that's obviously partly what your thesis is going to be contributing towards. So, you know, watch this space for the thesis. But is there any other final thoughts or other reflections on the piece and that you have?
I don't know. I think we've covered quite a lot of what I was thinking. I think something that I maybe touched on but haven't gone into too much detail about is where I think some of the sensationalism comes from. So, you know, quite often, because it's archaeology, because journalists have to churn out however many articles a day in order to meet their quotas and to stay relevant on digital news spaces, we're looking at articles just being press releases. The press release gets written up, maybe a couple of other things added in, like very, very rarely. Generally, the press release will go to some sort of news wire site, which is a kind of outlet that isn't necessarily politicized, isn't linked to kind of a news brand name, but provides articles for other news brands. And it will be a cut and paste of the press release, and then it goes out into the world. And so what we're putting into our press releases is what people are reading. Very little of it is coming out. Maybe the headline will change. Very often it doesn't. It kind of sticks to a similar sort of title. It might get rearranged a little bit, but we're looking at our own words. And a lot of the time within those words, we use quotes, and those quotes can come from archaeologists who are really excited about their research, who are kind of, you know, maybe fresh off the site where it's happened, or are being interviewed or spoken to their press teams very shortly after they found out these results. or have a press team if they're based at a university or a commercial unit that are like, come on, give me a little bit more. And they're very excited, very sensational comments. It's like, this is a once in a lifetime discovery.
Always once in a lifetime.
Yeah, this is groundbreaking. This is changing.
Groundbreaking is such a painful. Yeah, go on. Sorry.
It's a stupid pun as well, but
I know.
This is going to change how we view the Neolithic. This is amazing for Ireland.
New page in the history books.
Yeah, all of that. There's a particularly poor one, which is a tomb found in Ireland that, you know, potentially has, I don't know how else to describe it, but people that were conducting incest, the archaeology found.
Incest
and so that then became in the press, like, it was linked to Egypt and pharaohs. It was like, oh, this is like the Irish pharaohs because of the incest, and that came directly from the archaeologists. And you think, are we decolonizing or not? Well,
yeah.
So yeah, I think media training is going to help with that, but also we need to think about the impact of our work and whether what we're achieving is going to change the face of the Neolithic in the UK, or whether it is a really nice discovery, but actually it's more important to use that quote as space to talk about the discovery, to talk about the context of the archaeology, and to not just give out these platitudes of like, this is great, this is amazing, and to try and use those quotes to kind of promote more information. And whereas at the moment, it's an awful lot of, you know, generic emotions, and it's nice to enjoy your field, it's nice to be passionate about something. I don't want us to completely lose that, but you know, if what we're saying is going to get translated into these problematic spaces, we need to be really careful about what it is that is said there.
I think this is an important paper for anyone who is in the archaeological community and works in public facing capacity, and that's a lot of people, from museums to commercial units to universities to avocational local societies, you know, amateur groups. So I really hope it gets read and reflected on, and some really great case studies in it. But it also is a showcases your future ongoing thesis work. But I had a final question is, and you may want to answer this diplomatically or not, but what is your experience, your sense of the modern world of academic publishing? This was a big journal where you have to submit electronically, peer review. What was your experience?
Oh, okay. So I'm overall fine. I think I went into this with, you know, no context. This is my first article. I haven't written for a book chapter or kind of done any sort of formal academic writing before. So I ended up submitting my first draft in December, I think, 2023. So the amount of time it takes was a surprise, because we're now in September. I kind of knew it could be long, but I wasn't expecting
that's
that
about
long.
right. That's about, I've known far longer and known shorter, but you know, that's good. I think that's all right. 9 months, 10 months.
Yeah, but interesting things have happened since then. So you know, Flint Dibble going on Joe Rogan is a significant thing that would have been really interesting to write about, and some people might read my paper and go, why isn't that in there? But I submitted it ages before that happened. Yeah, so I think that was kind of interesting how long it would take. But being peer reviewed is obviously new. I'm used to your comments and the supervisor.
My merciful, generous, never critical comments. No comment. Yes, what you're going to say. No comment to the comments. No, but yeah.
No, you're always very constructive, Howard.
Did you hear that, everyone?
Yeah, so it was my first experience of peer review, and it was maybe bizarre. I think both the peer reviewers I'm really grateful for. I think that they gave me some really important points. There were some things that I disagreed with them on. Well, basically one peer reviewer came back with like 1,000 words. They were like, yes, this is very good. I'm really interested in it. What an important paper. They kind of said they didn't have many changes to make, but then it was 1,000 words, so there was a few changes to make. And then the other one was just basically like, yeah, this is good. Here's 3 bullet points, maybe think about these things. And that was it. So a lot of my attention was paid towards one peer reviewer. And I think...
That always happens. There's always one. Yeah.
Yeah. but what they were saying was always, I think we've discussed before how it can potentially get a little bit tense sometimes, but I thought that it was very kind. They were always very constructive with their comments. And the things that I disagreed on, I felt like I could respond to. And then when I did respond, they kind of came back with the second round of peer review to just be like, okay, yeah, we understand now, this makes sense. So there was a lot of conversation around editorializing. So something that I was quite keen to do was to use the language that I think archaeologists are using. I wanted to talk about bad media and to put these kind of like moral judgments on things, because I think that it's important to reflect that back to people and to say, do you see how you sound? Can you see how this is coming across? And I think there was a bit of discussion around whether that was the right thing to do, whether I was kind of upholding
something. You put it in quotes, you put it in,
Yeah, it was bad. So there was a bit of discussion around that, but generally fine. Oh, they did keep calling me Dr. Chambers, which I really enjoyed because I'm not a doctor.
That's in the route. Dr. Chambers then does this, and Dr. Chambers needs to reflect on that. That's really weird. I wonder if that's an American thing.
It wasn't like that. It was more just the way that it was being addressed to me, and it was like Dr. Chambers, blah blah blah, and I thought, okay.
Respect. Well, you are going to get a doctorate, and it's nice, but I think that's a default, particularly from a gender perspective and from a ethnicity perspective. Lots of different intersectionalities where that can be removed, and as an editor, I've noticed it. And I go, it's interesting that we have. I just make a hypothetical. An edited collection. The men get Professor this, Doctor that, but the women get Amy or Jane or whatever. And you think, hang on, we've had that conversation recently with Trump versus Kamala, this whole when a first names versus. And it's an interesting broader cultural debate about respect and so on. So that's interesting.
Yeah, even before the PhD is in. I mean, I actually have to finish it now, otherwise I'm going to have to call them liars.
No, you've got to make it happen. You've got a lot of work to do, and it's good stuff. But, I think it's just wonderful to be able to have a chat with you to celebrate this moment, an Archaeo Death interview about Archaeo-media with Archaeo paragraphs and Archaeo title. Sorry, it's late in the day. What can I say? But I'm like this in the mornings too, so it doesn't like I have no excuse. I saw some prospective students' parents today, and they said, "Are all lecturers a bit like this?" And I went, "Oh no, not everyone's like me. Don't worry." And I think I pitched it right, because I think they may have got. I was a bit hyper, and I think they thought I was a bit like a sort of a bouncy Tigger type professor, and I was like, calm it down now. No, sometimes I do really sedate, calm lectures. Oh, and they took that as an assurance that it's okay, Anyway, so any final thoughts, Ellie? Or should I say Dr. Chambers?
No, not yet. No final thoughts, even though I just sort of slagged people off for doing this. I am very happy that it is out and it is a paper and it exists, and I think that it is worth a read, otherwise I wouldn't have written it. So I'm happy to back myself on that one. But I'm also very happy to have conversations with people if they disagree with me or if they want to talk to me. Obviously, there's like correspondence email on the paper. I'm guessing there will be a link in the description to
You've got to do that. There'll be a link in the. Yeah, it'll be we'll put the link in there and get in. So people can go and read it themselves.
Yeah, and it's open access, so everyone can read. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ellie. And keep on trucking, keep on digging the Archaeo-media, and looking forward to the thesis out next week. I mean, very soon, not next week, but in due course.
Thank you.
Follow Archaeo Death on YouTube, TikTok, WordPress, and a host of other social media.